Sweetheart, if you wouldn't mind checking the phone to make sure I go live, I'm actually live. It appears that it might have gone live. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. We're back with lesson number 9 in Ephesians. We're still in chapter 6 and we're moving through this. Just to look back on Ephesians real quickly. Again, we've been talking about this. The book is broken into 2 parts. We have a part that, the first 3 chapters, is Paul talking about what's been done for us. And then the statement at the beginning of chapter 4 being, therefore, in other words, since all this has been done for us, this is what we should be doing. And and mostly this last part that we've been talking about here, 5 and 6, is especially about how we should be treating other people and how this impacts them and how, explaining what difference this makes and showing that we are Christians and how our actions can impact other people to come to Christ. And that's why we do and act a lot of the reason why. There's other reasons, but that's a big part of the reason we are to act the way we are. A lot of it is based on love. I've said, and I keep using chapter 4, verse 1. It's like probably the theme of the book, if you'd say, but it's definitely one of the most important verses in the whole book of Ephesians. And it tells us, which is right there, it says, I therefore, a Paul, prisoner of the Lord, that's that therefore I was talking about, says, I urge you to walk in a manner worthy of the calling to which you have been called, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love. That's one of the major things that we need to be doing. Now, we stopped last week at the cusp of Paul touching on slavery. And that is in chapter 6, verse 5. Now, I'm going to read those 4 or 5 verses there, and then I'm going to go back and let's talk about them for a minute. Of course, Paul had just been talking about husbands and wives and kids and how they should be treating each other, which all reverts back to 4:1. We need to be treating each other properly. And in chapter 6, verse 5 here, it states, bondservants, obey your earthly masters with fear and trembling, with a sincere heart, as you would Christ. Not by the way of eye service, though, as people pleasers, but as bondservants of Christ, doing the will of God from the heart. What's the will of God? What did he just say? 4:1, we need to be doing the right thing. Verse 7 says, rendering service with a good will as to the Lord and not to man, knowing that whatever good anyone does, this he will receive back from the Lord, whether he is a bondservant or free. It says in verse 9, masters, do the same to them, and stop your threatening, knowing that he who is both their master and yours is in heaven, and that there is no partiality with him. Okay. This is a touchy subject today, isn't it? I mean, people just, a lot of people quite frankly, don't understand it. Most people haven't done their history on it. Most people all they want to think about is slavery in the United States, African slave trade in the United States. Most of them don't. Have y'all ever heard of Nina? No Irish need apply. Did y'all realize that the first slaves in the United States were Irish and not African American? Something to think about. And there's a lot of people that want to throw dirt if you will, is one way to say it at the Bible or something. Why doesn't he condemn it? Oh, if God thought it was bad, why didn't God say it was wrong? Well, is sin wrong? Yeah. Okay. Does God have to spell out every single sin? Okay. What has Paul been talking about in this? Paul, all through this second half, most of the second half of most of the second half of the book of Ephesians, if you understand what I was saying there, has been dealing with how we need to be dealing with other people and the ramifications of that if we do it wrong, and what can happen good when we do it right. Y'all heard the saying, give unto Caesar's what is Caesar's, right? Are we excused from following the laws of the nation we live in as long as they are righteous? Of course. Of course not. I mean, of course we are, sorry. We're not to steal or kill. We're given to Caesar's what is Caesar's. We are to pay taxes. We're not to cheat on our income taxes. We're not to do this or that. And we do have to live in the world. And quite frankly, I don't know if y'all remembered last week, it was estimated more slaves in the Roman Empire than there are slaves worldwide today. And we talked last week about some of the liberal definition of slaves today. Supposedly, there's around 50 million slaves in the world. Now, they define any woman that has had an arranged marriage. If she did not get to choose her husband, they define her as a slave. Well, guess what? Muslim world, that's real common. A lot of third world countries, that's real common. That's even common in the United States when you're dealing with the Muslim religion. I worked for a guy in Atlanta when I was still in college. He met his wife the day before the wedding. Literally, he was from Pakistan. She flew over with his brother for them to get married. They'd been married for 20 plus years at this time, but she would literally be still considered a slave today. We talked about last week, if any of you have ever had a maid or a nanny, you are considered a slave owner. I'm not making it up. Go to some of these sites. If you have live-in care, who remembers the Brady Bunch? Yeah, do you know Alice was a slave, or at least that is how they define it today. So you take, say, 50 million and you remove 22 million women, so you're already down to what, 28 million. Then you start removing these other things. Anyway, this is a difficult issue. It most certainly is. There's some bad stuff out there, y'all. There's some bad stuff that needs to be stopped. Child trafficking. Think about it. Man, that's horrible. Sexual abuse. I hate to say it. And I don't think anybody here, I don't think there's a person that I personally know would ever condone slavery. But the truth of the fact is, especially during the Roman era when this was written, remember, this wasn't God's plan to begin with. Sin entered the world, and now we have people doing what God doesn't want people to do, thus slavery. Keep in mind, you had a choice. If you were in the army or an army came against you, all the people in Jerusalem in 70 A.D., they had a choice. They could do what they were told, or they could die. It was just that simple. That's how things were at that time. When you consider, Jesus also said, give unto Caesar what is Caesar's. What did he do? He told the slaves, in essence, to be the best slave you can be. Do the right thing, because you can impact, in essence, your owner for Christianity. Then he also said, in essence, you slave owners, y'all need to be treating those people right, just as you would a brother. He addressed it as it could be addressed at the time. Let me ask you a question. What happened to most of those? There was this famous thing called the slave revolt, right, in Roman Empire? How many of them died? A very large portion of them. If all of a sudden, instead of slave owners and slaves, you need to be setting an example to everybody else because you are now a Christian. You need to be different, not of this world. Remember 4:1. This is how you should be acting. This is how you need to be making a difference. Well, as we know, so many people now today want to stage a protest and sit in and destroy stuff or glue their hands to the floor and all this sort of stuff and break the laws of the nation, which we're called not to do, unless it causes you to sin. What would happen to Christianity if all of a sudden they just started throwing a fit? I'm just being honest. Especially in the Roman world, they'd have wound up dead. They were already persecuted enough. Now, does God realize that there's a time and place for everything? Yep. Do we as human beings, or should I say human beings, sometimes think they know better than God? Yep, they sure do. Don't we? And don't they? It's a touchy subject. I don't think any of us think it's right. And there are only so much that we can do about it. Right? Is the group of us here tonight going to put an end to slavery in the world? No. Can we say what's right and wrong? Yes. Can we be honest about it? Yes. Could we even donate to something? Yes. If one of us felt called to go and do something that is not against the law, would that be okay? Yes. Why was the book of Revelation written the way it was? That came out of left field to y'all, didn't it? Can you imagine a Christian carrying around a letter that talked about the downfall of the Roman Empire and what was going to happen? What would happen to those people? Dead. I'm not saying it was written in code, but it wasn't saying Nero. And it wasn't talking about, what was about to happen to Jerusalem and everything else. There is a reason why the stuff is in the Bible. There's a reason why it's in the Bible the way it is. And it's because God knows better than we do. God chose to address this subject in the way He did because we are zero on the IQ scale when it comes to what God is. And we have to trust and believe that He handled it this way for a reason. He didn't say it was okay. Matter of fact, He said, bondservants, what was that? Masters, do the same to them. Do the same. What did He just say to the bondservants? He just said, obey your earthly masters with fear and trembling, with a sincere heart. Obey them as you would obey Christ. And don't be faking it, but do the will of God from the heart. Okay, if the masters are supposed to do the will of God from the heart, Paul has been talking for almost 2.5 chapters here about how they're supposed to treat one another in love, with respect. Humility is one of the big things. How would that change a slave owner if he treated the people he owned in that fashion? Be a big difference, wouldn't it? Oh, by the way, one of the other definitions, another way that people was common back then, we talked about people that were conquered, but if you had a debt you couldn't pay, which actually goes on today in the world, in different countries, if you borrow something from somebody and you can't pay that back, you have to go work to them until that debt is paid off. They consider that a slave as well today. But that was common as well. Those are the two most common types. People defeated in military campaigns and people who had debts they could not repay. So let's say, trying to come up with something. Let's say my neighbor, I don't know, loaned him money or loaned him my truck or something, and he stole it and blah, 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 and he said, look, I'll mow your lawn all year. Here we go, here's a good one. Say he breaks my lawnmower. He goes, look, I can't pay for your lawnmower, but I tell you what, I got another guy I can borrow a mower from. I'll mow your yard all year as a way of paying you back for destroying your lawnmower. Technically, by the definition today in the world, I would be a slave owner. Most people don't see it that way. We think of actual, literally purchasing another person is what most people as well think about it. But there is a big difference today, but I'm pointing some of these different things out too as well. We have to be informed on things, or we can give some really false information out there, or false conclusions, or not understand things properly when we don't at least do some research on a subject. And thus, what I've been talking about tonight, all the different ways that it's looked upon. Well, let's keep moving here. I'm just trying to figure out what I want to say next. All right, whole armor of God. Who's heard of this one? This is verse 10. We're getting down towards the end of this. Verse 10, put on the whole armor of the God. Verse 10 tells us, finally, be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might. Put on the whole armor of God that you may be able to stand against the schemes of the devil. Boy, how do we do that today? Back then they were used to seeing soldiers in armor. They'd have the breastplate and the helmet and the things on their legs and here, and they had physical armor they would put on. And why would they do that? Why would they put on armor? Protect themselves, to be prepared for an encounter, right? And it was tools that they had to help themselves survive in the battle against their enemy, right? What modern day tools do we have? And I'm not talking about level 5 plates that, no one in here knows what I'm talking about. Anyway, that's body armor, different types of body armor and stuff like that. I'm not talking about that, but what type of armor do we have today? We've got the Word of God, right? Faith. We've also got Sunday morning services, right? We've got Sunday night Bible studies. We got Wednesday night Bible studies. We've got reading the Bible daily. We've got apps that'll help us to do these things. We've got apps on our phones that we can touch a word in the Bible and it'll tell you what Greek or Hebrew word it is and where it's used and everything else. What about another thing we can do to help us be prepared for, and I'm taking physical armor of soldiers being prepared to meet their enemy to help them survive. And I am talking about today, not about physical armor like they had, but what we can do to strengthen ourselves and protect ourselves to be prepared for the battle we will have with Satan. What about being together with one another, with other Christians? That's definitely one, wouldn't you think? I mean, if you don't know, how many here has ever called somebody or texted somebody or sent somebody a card that was struggling or having a difficult time? Yeah, exactly. You were helping them to be strong, right? Yeah. There's a reason we're told not to forsake the assembly. And it's not because they want you sitting in the pews to give money. It's because it's for your benefit to be plugged in. Because it helps you to remain strong and in the Word. And hopefully to finish your race strong. So when you die, you go to heaven. Well, technically paradise, but y'all know what I'm saying. There are things out there, there are apps out there where you open up your phone and say, okay, today you're supposed to read this. Take you through it. What else could we be doing? How about making goals? When you want to get something done, it's good to make a goal, right? Because sometimes you don't get started, do you? Yeah, sometimes we don't get started. Or the next thing we know, it's been a year gone by now, and that thing we started to do whatever with is still sitting there. I mean, it happens. Have you ever considered to make a goal to read X amount in the Bible, a day or a week? You ever considered making it a goal to say, this month, I don't care if I even have to ask the lady at Walmart checking me out. Because I've done that before. That's why I said lady. I'm going to invite X number of people to church. You ever set a goal? Or watch X amount of videos for Bible study. You know how many videos we've got online now? 2 to 3, 3 videos every week for the last at least 5 years. That's just us. Think about it. And there are videos on any subject. I've introduced y'all to some of those videos that are on YouTube. Now you have to be smart about it. We live in the best of times and the worst of times. And you think, what do you mean by the best of times and worst of times? We have all available information at our fingertips. And there's bad information and there's good information. We have to be, we have to, I've heard it said, spit out the bones, when you're consuming something that's not good for us, we shouldn't consume it. But we've also have to make that decision. And we need to, I'll be blunt, we need to leverage that ability. Can you imagine some of your parents or your grandparents constantly in the Bible, what they would think today with what we have at our fingertips? They had to read it and try to figure it out and go answer questions and all this stuff. We can read it and then find 1,000 videos on it. Or simply go to any number of commentaries online that talk about it. Apologetics Press, if y'all were looking for a commentary, by the way. we can be uplifted and we can be uplifting. And that is protecting us and protecting the other. Thus, exactly what the armor of God does. And I wanted to, all of that, whether it's sending someone a text, I'm praying for you. Have you ever put the Bible on, pull it up on your phone, connect your phone to the Bluetooth in your car when you're traveling to Nashville or wherever, and just hit play and listen to the Bible as you go down the road? You can do that now. You could do that for a long time. There was cassettes, Bible on cassettes, Bible on CD. Just stuff in the background to keep you focused. That's what it's about. Keeping us focused. Keeping us focused. But it goes on to say, now I kind of, as an overview of armor, but let's look and see what it says, relating it to Roman armor of the time. It says, put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the schemes of the devil. Because I'm going to tell you, he's scheming against you. Look at everything in this world. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. Therefore, take up the whole armor of God. That's who we're fighting against. Take up the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand firm. Stand therefore, having fastened on the belt of truth. That's a good one to still use. Having put on the breastplate of righteousness, and as shoes for your feet, having put on the readiness given by the gospel of peace. In all circumstances, take up the shield of faith, with which we can extinguish all the flaming darts of the evil one. And take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God. Here's a really important one. Praying at all times. Verse 18. Praying at all times in the Spirit, with all prayer and supplication. To that end, keep alert with all perseverance, making supplications for all the saints, and also for me, that words may be given to me in opening my mouth boldly to proclaim the mystery of the gospel, for which I am an ambassador in chains, that I may declare it boldly as I ought to speak. We're going to wrap up here. We're going to pick up final greetings next week, and then I'll have a video for next week as well that I will show again. Goodness. I can't remember the name of the YouTube channel. You'll see it again next week. But there are some good ones out there. I strongly encourage you to be aware that there's more Bible stuff out there that may have some false teaching in it. Be wise, spit out the bones, keep the nourishment. I know there are people that won't listen to anything that is not 100% accurate. There is something to be said for that. There are plenty of apologetics press out there. I love those that have wonderful videos that are accurate and correctly taught. But y'all know a lot of preachers out there that preach correctly. And I promise you they have videos online too if you get tired of listening to this old guy. So focus yourself. When you're focused, you are protected. Think about ways to build your strength, build your faith, build your resilience through being focused on God and His Word. And with that, we'll close up for tonight. We love you all online. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to give us a call, and we will talk. That was different. And we will talk to you all soon. Take care.